So today in this video, I want to take some time dissecting Brewmaster in the 5th week of beta. I believe that's the week that we're in. And I just want to talk about everything that I think is working for the class and some things I are obviously like bugged or not working well, and just give my overall opinion on the state of Brewmaster. Some of this stuff is going to be subjective. Things that I like or I'm going to advocate for might be specific to what I enjoy about the class or have enjoyed up to this point, from previous expansions and seasons. And obviously, as you may know, Brewmaster had a lot of abilities pruned out of its kit, including things like Rising Sun Kick, all the way to Purified Chi and how that interacts with Celestial Brew. We've had a pretty significant rework and added and removed nodes as well, giving us new capstone abilities, reworking things like Exploding Keg to now also reset Keg Smash. Overall, a lot of the direction change I think is really good, and I think it opens up and lowers the skill floor for a lot of players, and making the class more approachable for the average enjoyer of Brewmaster, whether you're a novice, whether you're experienced, or you're someone who's really trying to get into it for the first time. So I want to start off by talking about specifically Breath of Fire. Now, Breath of Fire is an ability that we haven't played for a couple months now. It's been out of commission for most of Season 3 of The War Within. I think originally when this was kind of starting to become the meta build, a lot of players were sad to see Breath of Fire being put on the back burner, though it's not necessarily gone, it's just not an optimal talent. Now on live servers, because it's not an optimal talent, it has also fairly restricted the talents you could take, because Breath of Fire has a lot of attached nodes, things like Salsalabim versus Scalding Brew, as well as Dragonfire versus Charred Passions. Now, basically, if you don't play Breath, all of those talents are also somewhat dead and you can't even take them. So now, not only is Breath of Fire kind of back on the menu, but it is insanely overpowered for a lot of reasons. First off, the current tuning on it I think is fairly good. I think it's actually in a nice state. I would prefer it if Breath of Fire was actually our top damage or a very competitive damage element in our current kits. So the reason it's working out really well currently is not only is it just tuned well, but it also interacts with our current tier sets. So our tier set going into Season 1, as it currently stands, is Keg Smash is increased by 10% and Breath is increased by 10%. So already, while it isn't mandatory, it's incentivizing you to play Breath of Fire because you're going to get a damage increase from it. Now, Keg Smash's energy cost is also going to be reduced when you have the 4 set, and when it strikes a mob afflicted by Breath of Fire, it's going to deal additional fire damage. So these two things in conjunction with each other kind of make it mandatory to play, which I'm all for. But because Breath of Fire is now arguably mandatory in this hypothetical states, it makes it really difficult to play Rushing Jade Wind, which, again, isn't a big issue. I think people see it as an interchangeable thing. Also, Rushing Jade Wind got some, I would argue, some pretty negative changes to it. So I wouldn't recommend playing Rushing Jade Wind regardless. But yeah, Breath of Fire is awesome, and it's really good in conjunction with Vital Flame. So in these larger trash pulls, when you're not only getting Breath of Fire, you're getting an empowered Breath of Fire through Dragonfire Brew, Keg Smash is also resetting Breath of Fire, and you're getting the bonus from your tier set. Vital Flame ends up making Breath of Fire feel like the best way I could compare it, or an example of people who used to play Brew a long time ago, is that Breath of Fire now feels like a pseudo kind of Keg of the Heaven style ability. You get this upfront burst damage from Breath, giving you a fairly sizable heal, and the dot it applies is also pretty potent. Now with this, one thing I would like Blizzard to add back is Breath of Fire into the Blackout combo, like it previously it was or is on live servers. So if you aren't familiar, or if you're only familiar with the beta version of Brewmaster, Blackout combo on live also affects not only Tiger Palm and Keg Smash, but also Breath of Fire, Celestial Brew, and Purifying Brew. Now, Celestial Brew / Celestial Infusion and Purifying Brew, I'm fine with those being gone, but having an amp on Breath of Fire would make for some really cool synergies that I would love to see. Blackout combo in this current state feels very, very, very boring. In AoE, or in moments where you need kind of like cooldown reduction on your abilities, you can just Keg Smash or you Tiger Palm. If you want damage, generally Tiger Palm. If you want CDR, you hit Keg Smash. I feel like with Breath of Fire, it at least gives you a little bit of complexity in that, but more often than not, you're going to follow a Blackout Kick with like a Tiger Palm, but it's there for players who want to maybe get more healing. out of Vital Flame, or like the more damage out of just Breath of Fire and Dragonfire Brew in like a direct damage kind of way. And so that would be one thing that I'd advocate for Blizzard reintroducing if they'd like to, but also I want to. I'd love it if that was it. When I was doing some limit testing earlier today on my Brewmaster and some 15 Algothars, every time I hit Blackout Kick, I was like, man, I'd love to just be able to hit like the fattest Breath of Fire on these ads. Yeah, that would be, I think, a little bit cool. Blizzard removing Tiger Palm, or not Tiger Palm, Rushing Jade, what am I saying? Rising Sun Kick, holy shit, there we go. They also removed Purified Chi, and they've really simplified Blackout Combo. It feels like the skill curve with those abilities and those different sequences in moment-to-moment combat feel like the class is kind of missing a little bit of complexity. I would say Brewmaster has become one of the easier tanks to play. You don't have defensives. You don't have like any complex modifiers that you have to kind of sync up. There's no ramp to your healing. And now it just feels like you kind of just hit whatever you have coming up. I'm going to probably talk about that when I talk about Apex talents in a bit, but I do want to talk about specifically Celestial Brew versus Celestial Infusion currently. And specifically Celestial Infusion. So currently, Celestial Infusion does not work. When you hit Celestial Infusion on beta right now, it is not, well, it's giving you the buff, but it's saying it's absorbing 0 total damage. So this gets removed immediately, and it basically doesn't work. So if you are playing Celestial Infusion on beta, you are not benefiting from the heal. Now, I will say that Celestial Infusion and Celestial Brew are very, very undertuned. Obviously, it's early beta. I just want to make sure everyone knows that it is currently like our 6th or 7th heal in some situations. It is currently giving us an absorb. The tooltip for Celestial Brew says 59,000 damage. I have 600,000 health. So right now that would translate to give or take a 10% absorb. Now there are some modifiers with like training. Celestial Brew has the condition on it, or the coefficient for its scaling is based on mastery, which is, or attack power specifically, which mastery gives you. So if you have things like training and you're in deep stagger and you have Heart of the Ox active, like the shield is a little bit higher. It's maybe in the 15% range, give or take in either direction, about 4%. But the heal right now for Celestial Brew is so minimal, and Celestial Infusion just straight up doesn't work. So right now it's I can't say it's not playable, because I actually timed a 15 Skyreach playing Celestial Infusion, which wasn't giving me any healing. And so the tank has a lot of kind of like triage counter, which is kind of cool. So that would be like one major bug right now, is that Celestial Infusion isn't working, period. Now, Celestial Brew does work. I think most players do prefer playing Infusion. I think Celestial Brew has merit in different scenarios, but because of how it's currently tuned, you can't even argue that it has merit, because the shield gets absorbed in an instant, pretty much. Actually, Elixir of Determination is providing more healing than Celestial Brew in some cases, which is wild to me. So Blizzard definitely needs, this is something that I want to keep an eye on going forward, is, well, maybe if the idea is that Celestial Brew isn't meant to actually be an efficient heal, or it's something that you could opt in or opt out of, I'm fine with that. But that gets into this whole argument of like, okay, well, then if we're required to play Breath of Fire with our tier set, but then Celestial Brew or Celestial Infusion aren't necessarily required to play because of just how they're tuned, or they're not meant to be at like the forefront of how Brewmasters live, then Breath of Fire, I think, and some of the kind of joint nodes need to be moved to a more accessible point. Because right now with current tuning, there's no way we play Jade Flash. This is such a terrible ability, and there's no other way to path down without taking it. So you're going to play it naturally. So kind of coming back to it, I want to talk a little bit like about healing specifically. Vital Flame is like fuck, it's so good. Especially in these like larger pulls. Now it's not counting all fire and nature damage abilities. Some things are excluded, specifically in regards to Shado-pans, like Shadow over the Battlefield damage, or because it was changed to nature. Also, your harmonic surge damage and potential energy damage from Master of Harmony also doesn't contribute to this, but Breath of Fire does. And so that feels really cool, because you have like a lot of these leech effects. You have not only Vital Flame, but you also have things like Refreshing Drink, part of the Apex talent, which is really powerful in its current state. You can see that it's healing for 83k over 8 seconds. That is way more, that is like 60%, 50% more than what Celestial Brew is currently healing for, or absorbing, I guess. So Refreshing Drink is really, really powerful. So that's another triage effect that you have. You could play Nizao's Resolve. Also another powerful, it's currently not tuned very well, but it could be a potential like for kind of that triage, which Brewmaster is known for because they have stagger. And then, of course, additional things like Gaiplin's Imperial Brew giving you a burst of healing whenever you clear stagger. You also have Celestial Fortune from your Critical Strike, giving you a bunch of healing, which also works in conjunction with Vital Flame and Nizao's Resolve and Expel Harm healing and your Ox Orbs, etc. So the Brewmaster's ability to self-sustain is actually in a really good state. Besides the fact that I think Celestial Brew healing is a little low, I think for the first time since maybe Keg of the Heavens existed, Brewmaster actually has like insane self-sustain in these situations. In previous beta cycles, more often than not, Brewmaster fell short in these kind of limit tests that I will kind of probably be showcasing in this video. You go into a poll, you can live with like your cooldowns, you can have some burst healing here and there, but generally what ends up happening is Brewmasters are always falling behind and they need a healer to kind of keep them up. Now, in this current build, and in this current state of Brewmaster, you have so much self-sustain through things like Vital Flame. And don't get me wrong, Awakening Spirit is also good, but in larger pools, Vital Flame tends to be like a little bit stronger. But I think there is probably a high chance that Awakening Spirit will also be fine to run and maybe more competitive in some situations, depending on tuning. That Brewmaster, again, for the first time, has like crazy good sustain. And I like how that feels. Besides the fact that Celestial Brew is kind of down bad, I think it's pretty good. So moving on, I don't want to rant too long about that. One thing I ended up doing was I went into Algothar Academy 15. I tested both of the hero talents in a build that I thought was like fairly optimal. I did only one pack at a time. I tried doing more than one pack, but ended up kind of getting obliterated pretty quickly into the poll. I also want to see if other tanks can do more packs. They have changed Algothar Academy Trash to actually now have like a tank buster bleed. So it has made the like quote unquote limit testing a little bit more hard because you have this tank buster that applies a nasty bleed. Some tanks are good against bleeds. Some tanks are not good against bleeds. Brewmasters are kind of like in the middle, like they're kind of good, kind of not. But with how weak Celestial Brew and Celestial Infusion is, it's hard to mitigate that specific like quote unquote tank buster or that bleed effect without having a substantial way to mitigate that damage. So if they fix these, I think Brewmaster could pull a lot bigger. But if the other tanks can, I'll come back and I'll see if Brew can do it. And maybe I just need to spend more time trying to like workshop the pull. So I did one pull. It's like 8 lashers plus one of the big guys. Brewmaster was able to successfully do it in both hero talents. Shado-pan seems to be doing more damage currently tuned. I guess what I was trying to get to is that I'm limit testing, and through my limit testing, there's still like one other major bug that I want to just mention here, just in case people are aware or aren't aware. Empty the Cellar was buffed in a recent build, but it's still unfortunately targeting just mobs that you're not in combat with, which is clearly an issue. Like, right? Like you don't want to be pulling mobs you didn't plan on pulling yet, because that could be, God, fuck, I'm going to say the word problematic. So I'm hoping they fix this. As of right now, it probably seems more like a single target talent. I think it's a cool idea. I think having a lot of additional, like getting 15 seconds off all your brews when you hit this button after exploding keg, it feels good. Like it's not a bad button to hit. It's just when you're in a dungeon and you're sitting there fighting 8 mobs and you're kind of overwhelmed, there's like a couple of kicks going off. There's like swirls to dodge. And then when you go to hit this thing and it pulls another pack, you're like, God damn it. And then you wipe. It's like, oh, fuck. Okay. I guess we're, I guess I can't run this talent. So I'm hoping they fix this. Unfortunately, like if I'm going to be honest, I just don't think there's going to be a practical use for Empty the Cellar in most cases. I think in Raid, there's never a world where you need 15 seconds off of all of your brews. I think in Mythic Plus, you can make an argument for it, but I think there's other more powerful talents, and a well-played Brewmaster will just naturally get a lot of cooldown reduction, and Empty the Cellar just won't be needed. Because the damage tuning on it right now is like significantly worse than Fuel on the Fire, and Fuel on the Fire has good synergy with Vital Flame. So really good burst damage on this. While limit testing, I guess I'll talk about this before I talk about the Apex talent, is Shado-pan feels good. If you are playing Brewmaster on beta or plan on playing it on beta, Shado-pan just, it's very rhythmic. You kind of you have your same kind of standard rotation. You Keg Smash into Breath, you Blackout Kick into Tiger Palm. That's your rotation. You Purify Brew whenever you need to. You Celestial Brew on, like, essentially on cooldown at this point. And that's your rotation. You're flurry striking constantly. You're doing a ton of AoE damage. It's really enjoyable. When you pop your Ox, I think they've made Shado-pan a little too simple and easy and doesn't have like a high skill ceiling anymore. But basically you pop your Ox on cooldown and you just do your normal stuff. So it's good. Master of Harmony, on the other hand, it's not unplayable. If anything, it felt like it had a little bit more self-sustain because of how strong you have what I'm blanking, Mantra of Purity. There we go. So you purify more often, which has synergy with Gaiplin's Imperial Brew, therefore you have a little bit more self-sustain. The major problem with Master of Harmony, I personally think, is that despite trying to make Press the Advantage work, Press the Advantage just doesn't work in any serious capacity, so you kind of have to play like a very standard build, very similar to what you would play in Shado-pan. Therefore, I feel like the builds that are currently available based on tuning are fairly strict. Like you don't have a lot of budget to run different talents for different scenarios. I don't have huge issues with that, but I made a video, I think last week or a couple days ago, talking about Master of Harmony and why it's not working, basically after the most recent changes. The main problem with the hero talent isn't that it's unplayable, isn't that it can't live, isn't like its damage is a little bit lower compared to Shado-pan, but specifically the change that they made to potential energy / harmonic surge stack gains is that you gain it from not only hitting Celestial Brew, but also hitting things like Keg Smash. Now, I think previously that wasn't going to be a big problem, but with the current tuning on Apex talents and the fact that it resets Keg Smash whenever you do cast Celestial Brew, what ends up happening is you Celestial Brew, which then gives you the reset, which then gets you a 3 stack. So basically, instead of getting 2 stacks every time you're hitting Celestial Brew, you're essentially guaranteeing 3. Now, with the random kind of procs from Bring Me Another with the Apex talents, along with consistent Celestial Brew or Celestial Infusion usage, you gain way more stacks than you can actually expel. And that just turns into a damage loss overall. There needs to be some type of other ability that allows you to expel these stacks, whether it's like Chi Burst or Chi Wave, whether it's Blackout Kick, whether it's like additional stacks get dumped based on crits. Like if your Tiger Palm crits, you discharge 2. Something needs to change where you're not sitting at 6 stacks capped permanently. Right now, we don't have the energy resources, the energy reservoir to be able to dump Tiger Palms regularly to keep the stacks low, and we're incentivized to hit other buttons like Keg Smash, like Celestial Brew, because these things have a greater impact on our damage and our rotation. And so if Blizzard can fix that with Master of Harmony, I think it'll be in a fine state. Its damage numbers seem a little bit lower compared to Shado-pan, in my opinion. So I will have to see what the overall adjust looks like. But I think both hero talents are kind of in like a not terrible state. The last thing I want to really talk about are the Apex talents. The Apex talents were buffed, and they're so good. They're amazing. Now the problem, my complaint with them being amazing is that when you have Apex talents that are really, really impactful, whether it's damage, whether it's some type of like rotation synergy with other talents, healing throughput, etc., it's like, well, it's mandatory. And when it's mandatory, it really, really restricts your tree. What I liked about the previous iteration of the Apex talents is that they were so kind of terrible in terms of performance that you didn't want to run them, and you would actually have 4 extra points to put into your talent tree, which made for interesting synergies. You were actually able to like run Anvil and Steve. You were able to run Heart of the Ox with like Counter-Strike. You could play Ox Dance if you wanted to, even though you probably wouldn't. Now with the Apex talents being kind of locked in, it's like, well, now the tree's pretty boring in a lot of ways. Now, I will say the functionality of how Bring Me Another works, I think if you play all 4 points is really good. Not only is Refreshing Drink a very powerful heal on you, there's also a fair bit of rot damage in a lot of these dungeons, and being able to apply these Refreshing Drinks to your group, really, it's helpful. It is helpful. It can actually end up being one of your top heals at the end of a pull based on the kind of damage profile. So I like the talent. It just sucks that it kind of takes away from being able to play other cool stuff in your tree. I almost wish that the Apex talents were only 3 points. You had your main, your middle, and then your like capstone of your Apex, and then you got 1 free point. At least that would feel a little better, but it is what it is. The last thing I want to say about the Apex is that it fundamentally changes how Brewmasters kind of play. So how Brewmaster has operated in the past is because we're a class that hasn't operated off of like this haste contingency, or like the coefficient of haste didn't really affect us. So we just basically, I'm trying to sound smart, I'm not. We didn't play haste. So we had a very static rotation, and our static rotation was predictable. And now with the Apex talent, because of the way that Bring Me Another works, it's a 20% chance to randomly proc an empty barrel. Now, when empty barrel procs, it resets Keg Smash if you're playing the middle node, and it makes it cost less energy. So now we have like this fluctuating energy reserve that can change based on this RNG 20% proc of Purifying Brew. Now the capstone makes it a little bit more consistent because now you can control when it procs. Basically, if you drink Celestial Brew or you drink Fortifying Brew, you're guaranteeing an empty barrel. But the RNG can also be a little obnoxious. So if you're someone who liked Brewmaster for its staticity, I don't know if that's a word. If you liked Brewmaster for its very consistent rotation, the Apex talent kind of throws a slight wrench in there. I'm not saying it feels bad, but it's something you kind of have to get used to if you're not used to playing tanks that kind of have these like random reset procs like Prot Warrior, or does Blood DK have procs or random resets? Not really. It's just basically like your consistent rotation has a little bit of like a little bit more flavor. And so yeah, anyways, I ended up doing some limit testing with both of the tanks. You probably have seen footage sprinkled throughout of me like just solo pulling a pack. I know it's not as flashy as what I did a couple weeks ago. Like I said, the mobs have changed. Also, it's a plus 15 level, so the mobs are hitting for much harder. Overall, the feeling of Brewmaster feels good. Like the rotation feels good, but when you start to get into these specific elements like Celestial Infusion not working, Empty the Barrel not really working how it probably should, as well as Harmonic Surge overcapping permanently is just like kind of terrible feeling. But yeah, I'll leave both of my successful, I'm air quoting here, I'll leave my successful Algothar 15 builds for both Master of Harmony and Shado-pan in the description below. So if you want to like test out the build or see what I was playing with, I'll leave them down there. Those are all my thoughts on Brewmaster currently. It's a really fun tank to play. I just think there needs to be, obviously we're waiting for significant tuning, Celestial Brew specifically. Yeah, we'll see. It's early beta still, so this is kind of like my current feedback or my current opinion on the class, and I will keep you guys updated as the beta progresses. Anyways, let me know your thoughts down below, and I will catch you all in the next one. Peace.